Anthony Edwards is a young superstar, but could he try to force his way out of Minnesota? Some national media members are starting to think so. We break it all down. Today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your everyday podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg. I'm the editor at allyoucanheat.com here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Before we get to Team USA versus France in the final and put a bow on Nikola Jovic's Olympic experience, I want to talk about Dan Le Batard suggesting this week that Anthony Edwards could try to make his way to playing for the Miami Heat. So Le Batard said on a show this week that depending on who ends up owning the Timberwolves between Glenn Taylor and Alex Rodriguez, and it's a whole messy situation, they're basically fighting over ownership for X, Y, and Z reasons. And if Glenn Taylor ends up holding on to the team, and he has been notoriously not a good owner, a cheap owner, that if he ends up holding onto the team, that their general manager, Tim Connolly, who took the job presumably to work under A-Rod, well, if Tim Connolly leaves, that Anthony Edwards could try to force a trade to the Heat. Now, all of this is basically speculation. I think Le Batard called it an impartial report. I don't even really know what that means. David, what are you making of all this?
Every report is an impartial report, at least in theory. You're not supposed to be like,
Fair.
yeah, he wants to come here because I want him here. You know, that's not how it works.
Unless you're predicting the future. Yeah, everything's an impartial report.
I'm going to say this first, and then I'm going to answer the question. I don't want any part of this conversation. We've been through it with Donovan Mitchell. We've been through it with Dame Lillard. We've been through it with Kevin Durant multiple times. I hate it. Until Anthony Edwards, until I'm sitting 3 rows away from Anthony Edwards in Kaseya Center as he's holding his introductory press conference and Pat Riley's giving him a jersey with his number on it, I'm not going to believe that Anthony Edwards is a member or will ever be a member of the Miami Heat. So I'm just getting that out of the way right now because I feel like, as many Heat fans do, I feel absolutely jaded by this constant, could he? Like this sort of pseudo interest in the team. It's like, yeah, he absolutely loves Bam Adebayo. Who doesn't? Bam is one of the most popular players amongst other players in the NBA. Eric Spoelstra, again, a guy who is honest and tells you to your face what's going to happen. Every player loves that from their coaches. Like, that's what makes him a good coach, is that he connects with you and he tells you straight up, guess what? You know, this is your role. This is what I expect out of you. If you do it, you're going to play. If you don't do it, you're not going to play. That's how it works out. They appreciate that level of honesty. So there's obviously an interest there for Anthony Edwards to play here. But the reality is, it cannot happen. So having gotten that out of the way, you know, I think I've never seen it before. You and I were talking about this. Like, we've never seen a player tied so completely to a general manager that if that's the one shred of evidence holding up this impartial report of Le Batard's, I don't see it really happening. I don't know if Tim Connolly is forced out of Minnesota, that Anthony Edwards goes, whoa, that's my GM. I'm going to stick around and play I don't want to play for this team anymore. Get me out of here. We've never seen that with a coach, and like the coaching relationship is obviously a much stronger one. Like James Harden and what's his name?
Daryl Morey
in Philadelphia. Daryl Morey had as close a relationship as ever until years later when he was calling Daryl Morey a liar because he didn't pay him. So, you know, relationships like that in the front office and players is a very difficult one, to say the least. I don't think it's really as strong a friendship as Le Batard might be suggesting here. I've never seen that connection between a player and a front office staff member, where to the point where he's going to be like, I'm forcing my way off this team. Edwards is a young superstar. He's getting paid a lot of money. He's just led this team to a deep playoff run. They've got a good core being built there, that's been built there, and they're continuing to add to it. I don't see any reason on earth why he would want to leave Minnesota, aside from the fact that it's Minnesota, and I think at some point you just get used to that sort of thing. I know he's a Southern kid, but at the same time, I think he's already been playing there. He can establish himself as perhaps the best franchise player there since Kevin Garnett, and maybe even surpass Garnett someday if he takes him deeper into a playoff run and maybe even lead them to a title. So there's a lot going for him if he chooses to stay in Minnesota. If he were to entertain, for whatever reason, some idea of playing for another team, yeah, I could see Miami being in the mix. But we've been through this before. I don't know what it would take for Miami to even potentially sniff around for an acquisition of Anthony Edwards, but they just don't have it.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of what it would take to actually trade for Anthony Edwards, to your point, David, before, like the Heat have been trying to trade for Kevin Durant, trying to trade for Damian Lillard, and it just every single time they haven't had what it took to get that deal done. So to expect, like Anthony Edwards' trade value is miles ahead of what Kevin Durant's was, what Damian Lillard's was when they were on the market. And so to try to get into the Anthony Edwards conversation would be difficult, but like that's even like we're so far ahead of it right now trying to discuss what a potential trade package would look like, you know. And to your point, if you have to trade Bam for Anthony Edwards, that defeats the point. If Anthony Edwards wants to play with Bam Adebayo, then he needs to be on the roster. That said, what doesn't add up with all of this reporting, or I don't even know, reporting, rumors, whatever we want to call this stuff, is that Anthony Edwards is entering the first year of a 5-year contract. He cannot become a free agent until 2030. So if you're out there and saying, well, if he forces his way to Miami, then the Heat can get him for the cheap. Good luck. If you got 3 or 4 years left on your contract, like you're not forcing your way anywhere. We just saw what happened with Damian Lillard. He ended up playing in Milwaukee, right? Anthony Edwards doesn't not wield that kind of power. No player does, unless there is some sort of next shoe to drop in the player empowerment cycle where we're going from players in the final year of a contract being able to, or up for an extension, be able to force their way somewhere based on whether or not they'll sign that extension long-term with their new team, like what Pascal Siakam did last trade deadline, right? Where he basically forced his way to the Indiana Pacers. Like, I don't know what that looks like in terms of player empowerment and how Anthony Edwards could wield such power, because it would be something we've never seen before, even from people like LeBron James and all these things. So what are we talking about here? I mean, when we're suggesting that Anthony Edwards could try to force his way to Miami, sure, maybe in 2030 he wants to play for the Heat, but that would just be him making a decision as a free agent. Hey, I no longer want to play for the Minnesota Timberwolves. That has nothing to do, to your point, about who the general manager is or who the owner of the team is. Like all of this stuff, or like what Batard is suggesting here, is that all this arbitration between Glenn Taylor and A-Rod, this is supposed to be resolved within the next 6 months, right? That's the whole idea here.
Right.
And so what? Like in the next calendar year, Anthony Edwards is going to force a trade? Like that's the part to me that just simply does not add up.
This speculation is 5 years premature. And in 2029, after the next 2028 Olympic round, where Eric Spoelstra is the head coach of Team USA and he's taking over for Steve Kerr, and Anthony Edwards is back and featured as his number one player, because by that point LeBron will maybe be flirting with retiring. Kevin Durant might have been retired by that point, etc. Bam and Ant will be like their stars of the Olympic team. This will be Bam's third go round in 2028, and Spo's the head coach. Then we'll get to pick this up again in 5 years and be like, they played together last year in the Olympics. Now we can see this happening where he can finally force his way out of Minnesota. By that point, who knows what's going on with the Timberwolves or with the Heat. So it'll be interesting to take up this conversation, but it just feels extremely, extremely premature to think that Anthony Edwards, given everything that they've accomplished, like, I mean, they had a fantastic season last year, certainly better than Miami's. I mean, their future's brighter than Miami's. At this point, I don't see any reason where he want to get traded out.
What we're talking about, I mean, you're mentioning how premature this is. I mean, we're literally talking about whoever gets elected president in November will be done with their first term by the time Anthony Edwards can, like a year before Anthony Edwards can become a free agent. Like that's what we're talking about. So we have never seen a player this young, the face of a franchise with the brand new shoe deal, signature shoe with Adidas, like everything in front of him. He has no reason to want to leave to change his current situation. They were just in the conference finals, right? Like there's no reason for Anthony Edwards want to trade his situation other than presumably getting a different general manager and playing, by the way, if that were to happen, for the same owner that you've been playing for your entire career. Like that doesn't strike. And you made such a great point. We have never seen a superstar care about that stuff to the degree to which that they'll be like, I'm out of here. I'm forcing my trade. I'm going to go somewhere else. And even if he wanted to, right? Even if we just check those boxes, make those assumptions that he doesn't want to play for Glenn Taylor, that he doesn't want to play for another general manager that's not Tim Connolly, that whatever, maybe Glenn Taylor takes over and Minnesota says, you know what, we're going to be cheap and we're going to trade Karl Anthony Towns and we're going to reduce payroll. And all of those things happen. Let's say all of those things happen and Anthony Edwards looks around and says, you know what? I just can't win in Minnesota. What looked like such a bright future at one point, in June of 2023, no longer looks like such a bright future. What if he could come
Done.
to all of those conclusions? Cool, dude. You're still under contract for 5 more years. Good luck forcing a trade. And I just it would be a level. I am not going to sit here and say it's impossible. I will never say anything is impossible in the NBA, right? And I would love it for Anthony Edwards to find a way to Miami, right? Like that would be incredible. What a face of the franchise, right? But I will doubt it strongly until it ever would happen, right? Because it would be a level of player empowerment that we have never even come close to seeing if he were to somehow manage to execute a trade to Miami with 3 or 4 or 5 years left under contract.
I'm going to get out ahead of it right now. I don't want Anthony Edwards in Miami.
No,
I think
don't
he's a terrible fit.
Boo.
I think his future is capped. He's not the kind of player that could ever. He doesn't have championship
don't do this.
heart.
Don't do
he's
this.
Not.
Don't do this. Don't do this.
Give me.
I know what you're trying to do.
Tyler Hero.
There we go.
Give me Tyler Hero every day over Anthony Edwards. That's the future of Miami right now.
And that's how the reverse jinx works, folks. That's at least an attempt at it. Nikola Jovic's Olympics are over. What did we make of his quiet summer, and what does it mean for him next season? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. There's just some things that people need to do every day to kind of just help maintain their level of self-care, whether it's meeting with friends, just taking a few minutes to yourself, maybe going through a workout, going out on a run, whatever it is. What are your self-care, whatever your self-care non-negotiables might be? Don't forget, never skip therapy day, because your schedule could be packed with lots of different activities, and it's easy to let your priorities slip. But we know what makes us happy, and you've got to make time for it. It's hard to do so, and sometimes you just feel like you need some time to yourself. You need to be able to explain your point of view to somebody, and if that's the case, you're thinking of starting therapy, well, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. And you just fill out a brief questionnaire. It takes a few minutes, and then you immediately get matched with a licensed therapist. And you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Let's say your schedule changes. You need to find somebody else that fits their schedule a little bit better. Boom. Very easy to do. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today, and you get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. There's no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed or entertained as Locked On NBA. Available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. David, you and I both host the Locked On NBA show. You do it Monday nights for Tuesday.
Yep.
I do it Thursday nights for Friday. We had a great time talking about the Olympics this whole summer, basically. It's provided a bunch of content. Locked On NBA is soaring up the iTunes and Spotify charts and all these things. Does a great job. So, but Nikola Jovic, his summer, a quiet one, right? So we didn't really know if he was going to play for the Olympics at all, or for Serbia in the Olympics. He's seen in a walking boot overseas and all these things. He ended up basically turning an ankle during a practice at Kaseya Center before he started going overseas, and then that sort of limited his ramp up to the Olympic Games. Plays a little bit for Serbia. It did make a debut. Did play, and that was the important part, right? Is that he played, and we didn't even know if he was going to play. Yeah. So he did play. So that part is maybe the biggest takeaway is, okay, the guy's healthy and everything's fine. But because of the injury scare at the beginning of it, the lack of the ramp up, whatever it was, really didn't factor into Serbia's rotation very much, and was basically, for the most part, a DNP-CD over the last couple of games for Serbia. Played a couple of minutes yesterday, but again, a quiet summer for Nikola Jovic. What do you make of it? What do you make of what you did see from him, the little bit that we did? Are you concerned at all that he didn't really get that much playing time?
Yeah, without any more additional reporting, and we've talked about it before, it's always a little difficult to kind of parse through some of the reports because, for one, we don't speak Serbian and we can't translate, and we don't know exactly the context of what's being said. Like, I mean, it was before group play, before even the friendly exhibitions with Team Serbia started. Like, when we were just hearing some of the initial reports, it seemed like he might miss significant amount of time. Like, there might be the possibility that he could miss out on the Olympics altogether. And then next thing we know, we see him practicing by himself on a court, and he's kind of putting shots up, and he's like, "Oh, I'll be ready to play," ramping up towards the possibility of joining the Olympic team. And sure enough, he plays in those exhibitions. He plays in group play. The fact that he's not playing now, again, if it was tied or confirmed directly to any kind of injury issue, at least I'd feel somewhat more comfortable, because then we could say there's a good chance that ankle will be treated in the next month and a half before camp starts, and he'll have time to recover, and then he'll be available and ready for action when the Heat convenes in mid to late September. But if it's not that, if it's not just the injury, and maybe it's just that his skills have taken a step back, or maybe he's just not as comfortable out there as he once was, or maybe he just doesn't fit with what they're trying to accomplish, then that's a little bit more concerning, because a lot of the hope going into camp last year, especially when it came to Nikola Jovic, was based off of his performance in the World Cup championships, where he was really, really good. Like, he was a big part of why they achieved the success they did, even without having Nikola Jokic out on the floor. Jovic was fantastic, making passes, making plays, running the floor, doing everything that we expect him to do in a Miami Heat uniform, and giving people a lot of hope and a lot of optimism for his impact last season. It wound up panning out that way. But if he's taken a step back, or for some reason maybe he just doesn't play, he's not playing as well with the Serbian national team, I could see why there might be some concern there, because he needs to keep growing and not taking steps back at this point in his development. He needs to continue to establish himself. We just ranked what we thought the key players that would be tied to this season's success would be, and we both had Jovic on the list because of what he's capable of, what his potential is, his ability to just change the dynamic of that starting lineup, or should he be coming off the bench, what he brings off the bench. He just needs to be a much more impactful player in those opportunities that he does get. So if he's taking a step back, to me, that is a cause for concern.
Yeah, that would be the biggest concern, is if he was just unable to earn minutes on a Serbian national team that kind of needed a player like Nikola Jovic, right? How many times would Nikola Jokic make some great pass to some perimeter player and they could just clank it off the rim, right? It just felt like over and over Jokic was dealing with teammates missing open shots. And the whole deal with Jovic, at least at this stage in his career, is that he's the guy that shot 40% last year, thrived in catch and shoots. Not just last year for the Miami Heat, but last year for Serbia in the FIBA World Cup. We talked about all that stuff in terms of his three-point shooting. That all started in the FIBA World Cup on this stage last summer. And so if he's not providing that, and if they didn't feel comfortable with him at least being able to provide that, then that is a concern. I don't know how big of a concern. It's a different coach. It's a different organization. There's different politics, different rules, things like that, right? Jokic wasn't playing for Serbia in the World Cup in last summer because he was coming off that finals run. There was more opportunity, I think, for the young players like Jovic to kind of get some run, right? During that World Cup, it kind of felt like that was them gearing up, ramping up for this Olympic round. But that said, I do think that injury had to play a part of it. He wasn't involved in the earliest practices for Serbia. So much of what Serbia does is based off of Jokic-style play, right? It's chemistry and knowing where everybody's going and all these things. And Jovic and Jokic have very little history playing together whatsoever, despite the fact that they're both Serbian. So I that's where I'm at. I just think the injury basically derailed it. He played a little bit to start. He got hurt again later on in the Olympic process. He was a DNP-CD like 2 games ago for Serbia. So I'm going to chalk it up to that. That's what I'm going to go ahead and just chalk it up to that. Bam Adebayo, meanwhile, incredibly impactful for Team USA. The offensive production kind of comes and goes. He had a big 18-point game earlier in the Olympics, but his defensive impact has been huge. In terms of what we want to see from Bam in the final on Saturday, Team USA versus France. France, obviously, with that front line of Victor Wembanyama and Rudy Gobert, although they have split them up, right? France has made their big turnaround at the Olympics, basically by benching Rudy Gobert and bringing him off the bench, and they're playing Victor Wembanyama as their full-time 5, and then they're bringing Yabusele off the bench, and he's been awesome for them. But still, a big team, a physical team. And I think Team USA is going to need Bam Adebayo. I don't know to what capacity. I don't know if they're going to have Bam guard Victor Wembanyama. I don't know if he's going to be coming off the bench or whatever it's going to be. But Joel Embiid is going to be a big part of this team. Bam Adebayo is. Anthony Davis is. And this has been Steve Kerr's rotation. He has basically played all 3 centers at various points in every game throughout these Olympics. So I think this is going to be a really important game for Bam.
That's a good point. And, he's got to get his touches. I wonder, though, is he going to revert more towards backseat Bam, like the kind of guy who just kind of does all the little things, which is a fine version. And certainly we've seen him contribute at a high level and still contribute to winning in the Olympic play by being that version. Or can he is tomorrow the opportunity for him to kind of rediscover his offense a little bit and be productive as a scorer as well as a guy who does all the little things? I don't see it that way. I think he's going to double down on all the things that he does extremely well at an incredibly elite level and be the super defender. We'll see at least one key defensive possession from him because that's just who Bam is, where it could turn the tide in USA's favor. And I think that's what I'm expecting from him. Like, I'd love him to have a 20-point game or something monstrous like that. But like you saw in the win against Serbia, like it required Steph Curry being Steph Curry. Like, I mean, that was an incredible scoring performance for him against a really good Serbian team. I don't know that they can afford to just try to get Bam his looks. And unless Bam has his 3-point shot falling early on, it just feels comfortable and knocks down one, and they go to him again and again and again, and he gets that opportunity. I just don't see it happening. I think he's just going to be out there. He's going to try to challenge Wembanyama using his physicality. He's going to try to challenge Gobert. He's going to be able to keep them off the glass a little bit because even though he's undersized in comparison to those 2 towering giants, he can at least use some of the physicality at the FIBA level that he can't use in the NBA, and I think it's going to help him to a certain degree. And we'll just see him making all the little plays that help USA find a way to win because they will need him. But they're going to need a guy like Embiid too. Like we saw this yesterday. When Embiid has his shot falling and he can be a little bit more aggressive, like he looked like he was taking maybe for the first time ever his matchup with Jokic personally and wanting to attack him and wanting to score late in the games, even though he wasn't really being guarded by Jokic all the time either. That's a whole other story. We can go into that weeds, but that's for Locked On Sixers to talk about. I thought he looked, he looked much better than he has for most of Olympic play, and he certainly helped USA win that game. Although it certainly helps when you have LeBron James and Steph Curry doing what they've done throughout their whole careers.
Well, yes, to all the points you made about Bam just doing the little things. That's all they need him to do. That's all Team USA needs Bam to do. And maybe he does make some corner threes. Maybe he kind of leaks out into the corner and that's available for him and whatever. But I think he's going to be tremendously important, not just against Victor Wembanyama, because I think Team USA could do a few different things. I actually thought Canada had some success against France having Dylan Brooks guard Victor Wembanyama. So could we see maybe in that starting lineup, instead of Joel Embiid going against Wembanyama or Bam Adebayo later in portions of the game, maybe it's Drew Holiday. Maybe it's Derek White. Maybe it's Dylan Brooks. Devin Booker, whose defense has been really good during these Olympics. So maybe they go small, but Bam. Perhaps LeBron. Yeah, absolutely. Perhaps LeBron. Yeah. So maybe, Bam, I think is going to be really important when that second unit comes in too, where he's going to be matched up mostly. So France wants to go small. So basically they're playing only Rudy Gobert kind of like spare minutes here and there. The second unit, when Victor Wembanyama comes off, is Lesor and Yabusele. And that's a smaller group that's like kind of more FIBA style, which is what Bam does. Bam's a bigger, better version of Yabusele and Lesor, right? Bam and Anthony Davis, I should say. That second unit for Team USA. So they're going to basically be doing that, matching up against those guys. And if Bam does get matched up against Rudy Gobert in certain pockets of the game, I think the full court transition stuff is going to be really big for Bam, because we have seen time and time again, Bam, even in this Olympics, with his team, the teammates he has now, Bam bring the ball up. Bam brings the ball up and initiates offense. And if he's doing that when Gobert is on the court, or by the way, when Victor Wembanyama is on the court, that's going to force those guys out to the perimeter, closer to the half-court line, and take them away from the basket where they do most of their defensive damage. So I think Bam could play a big role, and it might not be 20 points. It might not look like that. It might not look like what Joel Embiid does in terms of the box score, but no doubt about it. I
Right.
think he's got an opportunity to make a really huge impact on this game. I asked you before the Olympics started that if you could pick any player on Team USA to add to the Heat, who would it be? I want to see if your answer changed after we've seen a bunch of these games. We're going to revisit that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. We all love sports. We love them so much. We're listening to this show and we never want them to stop. But the playoffs, well, they're over. You got fewer games now. The Olympics have certainly helped, but it's just not, the sports just aren't sportsing the way you want them to. And FanDuel, however, they let you keep the sports going whenever you want, because all you've got to do is open up the app and you can dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers, new ones, old ones, with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone all day, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. If you're new to us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on your favorite podcast app. All right, so I asked you before the Olympics started, if you could pick one player on Team USA to just, contracts don't matter, none of that stuff matters, take that player, pluck him off Team USA and off his current NBA team, and drop him onto the Miami Heat roster, who would you pick? And correct me if I'm wrong, David, I think you did pick Anthony Edwards when I asked you back then. Is that right?
That is correct, yes. So
is that still your answer, or has your answer changed at all?
Oh, well, that is a very interesting question. I'm kind of leaning, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we saw this footage also from, I don't know what it was, some kind of vlog or something like that, where Devin Booker was playing, was it with D'Angelo Russell, that they're playing golf or something like that? I don't know. And he's asked about draft night, and he's talking about the fact that he was going to Miami, and he says that he had his best workout with Miami. That's been making the rounds on social media over the last week while I was out in Indiana. We never really got an opportunity to talk about it too much, but seeing what Booker has done and Team USA play, like, he has risen his game to another level. He's been great as a playmaker, excellent as a shooter, scorer, helping as a defender as well. Like, he might just be entering he's been in his prime for some time perhaps, but he might be heading into another level of his development. As young as Ant is and as exciting as Ant is, I'm giving Booker some serious consideration in this. I don't know. Like, I mean, that's being able to choose between two of your favorite food dishes of all time. At the same time, it's like, Booker has played at such a high level. If you could add Booker to this team, I think it would be great. It would provide some really nice closure. As much as we like, you know what? You can have our cake and eat it too. Give me Booker now, and then in 5 years, we can resurrect that conversation about Anthony Edwards. You can wind up with both of them. How about that? You know what? For now, I think I'd take Devin Booker at this team, because I think he's also just a little bit closer to being at that level where he's hungry for a title to provide that the definitive point of his legacy. He's done a lot of things as an individual. He's been kind of overhyped. A lot of people have dismissed his scoring, made fun of his 80-point game and everything else like that. Like, they've done a lot to criticize who Booker has been. And now he's finally winning at a high level because he's got a very good team surrounding him, but he still needs that one piece. If he could achieve it in Miami, I think it would go a long way to establishing him as an all-time great. And I think he's hungry for that title to kind of, again, cement what his legacy in the NBA is. So I think he might be a little bit closer to winning a championship than Anthony Edwards.
This is what Steve Kerr had to say about Devin Booker at one point in the Olympics. Quote, "He's probably the guy who had been the most adaptable to go from a different role in the NBA to a new one here. He's adapted to being an on-ball guy, ball mover. The offense clicks when he's out there. The defense is really good." Devin Booker has become a different player for Team USA than what he is at the NBA level. He's doing all those little things, all those winning things. He is a fixture in Team USA's starting lineup, with a stiff arm, holding back Kevin Durant, Jason Tatum, who can't even crack the rotation. And when Team USA needed their best five at the end of that Serbia game, they went with Steph Curry, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Joel Embiid, and Devin Booker, right? Like, he is one of the, with a capital T, guys with a capital G for Team USA. And he's the kind of guy who can fill it up. Obviously, the 70-point game, we all remember all this stuff with Devin Booker. An unreal, elite level, probably top 5 or 6 scorer in the NBA. No doubt about it. But then he's also doing the defensive stuff. He's doing the ball moving stuff. He experimented quite a bit with being a point guard, especially like the first couple of months of the Phoenix Suns season last year before Bradley Beal was able to work his way into the lineup. And I thought he was really good at it, by the way. And I thought they probably should have done more of that even when Beal came back. But I think there's a lot of layers to his game that we didn't always get to see in Phoenix for various reasons. And now we're getting to see it a little bit more on Team USA. And if you put him with a guy like Bam Adebayo, who would allow him to kind of do those things, because he would obviously, like, Bam and Booker could play together. Jimmy Butler's still on the roster. Like, all of that stuff, Booker could still be the number one scoring option. But I think in that kind of context, wouldn't have to kind of do as much of the heavy lifting in that regard as he has to do in Phoenix. And I think with guys who are as unselfish and team-oriented as Bam, Jimmy, a coach like Eric Spoelstra, that could go a long way, I think, for Devin Booker. And if I were Devin Booker, by the way, I've gone through, 8 head coaches in my career so far, 2 different owners.
Yes.
Right? It's like unreal levels.
I talked about that during the summer. Like that. Yeah. I thought that was the key target. Like, if you're going to focus on any recruiting efforts or anything like that, and I know that's not how it works out. Like, I mean, you don't just share an agent maybe, but it has to be much more organic. Like, Dwayne and LeBron had a friendship that dated to their draft, the draft day process and everything else like that. They became friends leading up to the draft. They became friends at the draft, and their careers were tied early on, and that they just kind of peaked at the 2008 Olympics. That's one thing, but it can't be that same. The recruiting doesn't work that way. I think, to be honest with you, I've seen Bam talking a lot with Joel Embiid. So I don't think he's recruiting Embiid there, because, I mean, there would be more of a replacement more than anything else. So I don't think he's recruiting Embiid there. But I think, if Bam was going to target any one player in terms of like actively recruiting, it should have been Booker, because he's, again, to the point I've made earlier this summer, and now he's ripe for it. Like, he is at a point where he's 27 in his prime. But he's got to be exhausted. Like, he was drafted at such a young age out of Kentucky and just a one-and-done player. And he's been through so much crap off the court of, like, dealing with all this stuff. And again, everybody criticizing him for being a selfish player, a guy who can't win. And now he can win. And now he's mature. And now he's figured out his role. I think he's ready for that kind of stability. I know that a lot of people are going to interpret this as, oh, you're a Heat podcaster, et cetera. Like, you just want a guy like that to have that kind of stability, because I don't know that it's going to happen in Phoenix. Like, even now, as good as that team might be with their superstar level talent, like, there are questions about whether or not they're legitimate contenders. Who knows what Matt Ishbia is going to do? But Kevin Durant is always a volatile personality. Bradley Beal, I've already seen people talk about him coming off the bench, so there's no longer a big 3 there. I don't know what's going to happen in Phoenix, but it's going to be more the same with these brighter than ever spotlights on them. And I don't know that he wants that for himself. Maybe he might want to just be a guy who can kind of just contribute to a winning culture. And I know that certainly has a winning culture that would love to have a player of his caliber.
The Kentucky connection is real.
Can I flip it around and ask you?
Go ahead.
Hold on. I want to flip it around and ask you 2 questions. Is there a player on Team USA that you wouldn't want based on their performance? And is there a player outside of Team USA that you've seen an international play that you would want to join the Heat?
There's not a player on Team USA that there's not a player that I would not want. Okay. Like, beggars can't be choosers here. Like, wow. I'll take any of them. Yeah. I mean, the easy answer would be what?
You'd want Derek White on the team?
Sure. Put Derek White on this team. Heck yeah. Why not? Guy's awesome. The easy answer, I guess, would be Joel Embiid. Yeah. But, like, I would take Joel Embiid. I would figure out the Bam Joel Embiid lineup later. Like, I'll figure out the fit problems later on. Just give me the MVP. Former MVP.
I can't believe you're going to go solo like that, because you're going to lose a host on the show. I'll tell you that much. It's going to be half of the show it once was.
My answer is, I think my answer is also Devin Booker. I think that's where I landed also, just because, to your point earlier, it would kind of be a fun NBA storyline for both sides, right? The Heat finally get their superstar, the Kentucky connection between Booker and Bam. They formed it at the Olympics, this bond or maybe cemented it, so to speak, at the Olympics. And you sort of hashtag free Devin Booker from the mess that's been the Phoenix Suns for most of his career. Again, maybe they right the ship and it's all great and Devin Booker wins a championship in Phoenix and everybody's happy. Or maybe it looks a lot like what it's been for his entire career and they don't do that. And one day Devin Booker does become available. Now, similar to Anthony Edwards, Devin Booker can't be a free agent until 2029. He's in the first year of a 4-year extension here. So anything like that was going to happen, it does seem to be something that's a little bit further out. But man, I mean, that's not the question. Isn't what's the realistic one? The question that I proposed to you and you flipped back to me was if you could just take one player, pluck him off Team USA, pluck him off his NBA team, put him on the Miami Heat right now. You know, it's like we could say Steph, we could say LeBron, we could say those guys. Like that's easy. Devin Booker would be a lot of fun, especially if you were able to kind of get his timeline and Bam's timeline like together, and we could just kind of do this for another 5 years. That would be really cool.
What about a non-Team USA player? That's what I had asked, though. A non-Team USA player that has like impressed you, maybe that you might think that Miami would be interested in. Because I think Bogdanovic has been phenomenal. Like he showed a lot of heart. I don't know if it's this FIBA stuff. I mean, I know he's been a great scorer, but I don't know what it is about his role in Atlanta that just seems to minimize the player that he's been. Like he's a guy who can really light it up, and he has been lighting it up for Team Serbia. But then he plays for the Hawks, and he's just a guy you kind of tend to overlook. Although he's always been dangerous against the Heat, I just wonder whether or not there's somebody else like that maybe has stood up.
You're asking me what non-Team USA player I can get on the Miami Heat, and this is a no-brainer, no question about it. Give me Yabusele, dude. I love that guy.
Oh boy,
I am all in on Yabusele. That guy, the dancing bear, Dwayne Wade calls him. He's got like a little Udonis Haslem, like early Udonis Haslem to his game. I love him, man. I liked him when he came out of the draft. Like the Celtics picked him at the 16th or 17th pick or something. I'm all in on Yabusele. Give me Yabusele. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.